Thank you, and welcome to everyone here. We have the early morning session, so I hope that you've had your coffees, but I assure you that you will have no trouble staying awake because we have a fascinating and a very rare insight, actually, into what is the world's most powerful alliance, NATO. So I hope that you'll enjoy the session with Marie this morning. So this subject, it will capture, as I say, your attention, because we are going to look at the threats and the risks that are associated with artificial intelligence, but also at the opportunities, of course, because there are very many of those as well. Now, NATO, for anyone who does not know, the North Atlantic Treaty Organization, it has 32 members, and one of those, of course, is Turkey. And it has a collective defense at its heart. So if one country is attacked, all then come to its defense. So how will NATO then defend against AI risks? Well, I am delighted to be joined by Marie-Doha Besancenot, who is the Assistant Secretary General for Public Diplomacy at NATO. Thank you so much for giving us your time here today. So let me start then with the challenges that NATO faces in this area.
Good morning, and thank you, Louisa, for your welcome. And let me just begin by really congratulating the organizers of this very impressive event. It's my first time here. The challenges, I would say, the core challenges of the battle of narrative are not new. And this is, of course, at the core of NATO's DNA. And particularly my division in charge of public diplomacy, so making sure that our messages comes across. What is new, however, and has been said very well by Melissa Fleming, is the scale, the tools, and I would maybe add the fact that audiences are more and more fragmented. So it is no longer possible for us to have one message applying to all our audiences. We do need to tailor them, and sometimes across platforms. So that means resource intensive, having different editorial lines for different audiences, and delivering those messages fast and creatively.
We were speaking about this, weren't we, in practical terms. What does this actually mean? We were talking about social media, and you actually going on there and looking at what people around the world are saying about NATO.
Yes, so NATO has been investing for many years already in tools to make sure that we are aware of what is being said about NATO. I would say at the heart of our DNA was always keeping track of the perceptions of the alliance inside the alliance. So keeping track of how secure allied audiences feel in Turkey, in France, in Germany, in Canada. How do they feel about defense spending? Are they afraid? Do they support Ukraine? And for a long time, we've had this audience research, which is highly valued by our Secretary General, and which really enables us to track year after year how this trust and sense of security evolves. What is new is now we have the possibility to actually track real time without having to poll or ask or organize surveys. We have the ability to track what our audiences think just by looking online, because it's all there, all the data is there. So we do invest in big data tools, which help us really screen the whole digital landscape, look out for mentions of NATO and see how NATO is being discussed, positively, negatively. Is it creating fear? Is it reassuring? And really identifying the vulnerable audiences and using all this data to then develop our communications campaign.
And when it comes to communication, a word that many of you will have heard of is disinformation, but there we were speaking about how that is different to misinformation. Could you tell us a little bit about that, and then what are the threats there? They are the big threats. Well, disinformation is the big threat.
Yes, well, the main difference between disinformation and misinformation is the intention, right? The intent. Disinformation is indeed false narratives, untruths being promoted deliberately by someone with an intent to deceive. Misinformation is something that you might report or forward without knowing, without realizing that it's a wrong piece of information. So both can be harmful, but one is not intentional.
Are there any examples that you could give us? Because I think you were talking about some troops that had you were talking about verbal attacks, and also members of NATO, very high-profile members, who have had people say things.
So our mandate is to analyze what is relevant to NATO. And so that could be on the military side, on the political side, because we are a dual alliance. And indeed, we've had the situation this year with NATO troops, so allied troops in Kosovo, inside the KFOR, whose legitimacy was questioned, with completely false narratives being pushed on social media on alleged lack of neutrality and so on. So this, I would say, information attack in the information space has impact in real life on their own security. So because of that, we do take action, we do set the record straight, we do a campaign to explain again what their mandate is, their neutrality, and so on. On the political side, yes, we've had very recently, we have a new Secretary General for 2 months now, and just 1 month after he took office, indeed untruths, fake quotes were attributed to him. And recently, the chair of our military committee, with fake stories about quotes saying he was advocating for preemptive strikes in Russia, so of course completely false. These allegations all have one intention, which is making the alliance appear escalatory, whereas we are, of course, NATO, a defensive alliance.
And really, we were speaking about the fact that these information threats, they become weaponized. They become, they're quite something, aren't they, these microphones? They become weapons in the way that traditional weapons are used now. So in the future, how will you then deter? Are you actively looking at deterrence at the moment?
Oh yes, I would say this is very much at the heart of our mission. And I would say that deterrence plays an absolutely key role in our communications. Deterrence is one of the 4 key Stratcom objectives of NATO. So deterrence, assurance, expressing unity, and also maintaining trust among our audiences. If I take those 4 big objectives, deterrence has played a very big role ever since Crimea was invaded by Russia, and even more so since Ukraine was invaded full scale 2.5 years ago. So indeed, deterrence, and we do consider that deterrence can be nuclear deterrence. NATO is a nuclear alliance. It is also missiles, weapons, but it is also strategic communications. And indeed, we can deter with narratives. You can deter with military exercises, which are signaling something to audiences, and you can amplify that digitally. So this is what we do.
And societal resilience is a phrase some people might know, but some people may not know what that is, and that's part of strategic communication. What does that mean?
Well, societal resilience is very much related to information integrity and to empowering citizens to be able to tell the truth, to tell the difference between an untruth or a narrative that is aimed deliberately at manipulating their emotions, or the way they vote, or the way they relate to their government, or the way they relate to their neighbor, to really destroy the social fabric, the unity. So societal resilience is indeed one of the very key efforts at NATO. Resilience in general. It is considered a key role for nations to invest in their own resilience, but NATO is an amplifier of that. And indeed, when it comes to societal resilience, my own division plays an important role by supporting civil society trainings, NGOs work, academia, what initiatives that contribute to empowering citizens in that respect. And I have to say that the most recent NATO allies, Finland, Sweden, but also many allies from the eastern flank, never lost the knowledge and the understanding of the Soviet playbook of propaganda, and have been very good at preparing their own populations by programs at school, education, starting very small.
If we have a look again at global conflicts, because we can't escape the fact that the world is volatile at the moment, would you say that when it comes to Ukraine, Russia, when we spoke about misinformation, that was really the first time we really saw things being spread across social media in all sorts of different ways, didn't we? In terms of that danger being there, that threat.
Yes, I think what has become very apparent is that because Russia is not winning in the battlefield, Russia is investing massively in the information space. The figures that are usually mentioned as $1.5 to $2 billion a year. So it is a real information war in cyberspace, on social media. And indeed, the Ukraine case is very impressive, and I'll give you maybe one very concrete example. NATO has a center of excellence dedicated to Stratcom. It's based in Riga, and they have really studied very thoroughly how, at the early stages of the full-scale invasion of Ukraine, Russia has actually also invested in fake Ukrainian social media accounts in every village and every city they were intending to invade. So you can actually track the planned invasion according to all those fake social media accounts that were meant to welcome the Russians with open arms. So it really shows how the manipulation of the information space is used as a means of conquest and war.
And in the future, wars will be potentially fought online, do you believe? Does NATO believe that? In part.
That the future will be forged online?
That there will be, in terms of the battlefield, there is a military defense to be had with NATO, but also, I suppose what I'm trying to say is there's that online battle.
Absolutely. I think this is something that our military colleagues are working on continuously. How do you apprehend the information space as a military domain? What are the tools there that our adversaries are using? What are the tools that we allow ourselves to use? And right now, of course, it's a tough question for all of us because we do not use the same tools. And we accept that it's an asymmetric fight because we do not use troll farms. And we do not use proxies. We believe rather in partnering with civil society. We believe in collective alert sharing and setting the record straight together with civil society.
And I think a good place to end on is that in terms of strategic communication, how important then does NATO see that? And how important is it for the future?
I think more than ever, and if I had to sum up what we're going through, is really moving from communications to strategic communications. That means communications, messaging, developed with an intent to perform, to have political effects and military effects. So on the military side, this is very developed. Inside of the 4 objectives, you actually have effects, military effects, and we're really working towards this. So the efficiency of Stratcom, and this, of course, in addition to the urge to spread ourselves a little bit thin, but to address wider and wider. And this is very new for NATO also, the fact that, yes, we do need to address our allied audiences, but we also need to get better at telling our story out there to audiences who are less informed about NATO and who are not informed by us primarily, but by our adversaries. So preventing these perceptions from being misperceptions by going out there proactively, and that's also very new for us. So doing this in French, doing this hopefully soon in Arabic also by developing all the social media, and we keep doing it in Russian also because we do want to access Russian audiences too.
Yeah, it's very interesting that you have to sort of take on other languages, and now it's a global front that you are now working on at NATO. Marie-Doha Besancenot, thank you very much indeed for your expertise. I'm sure everybody will join me in appreciating your time today. Thank you.
Thank you, Louisa. Thank you.